Hello neighbor, I'm Robert Burns, Vice President of the Louisiana Association of Professional Auctioneers. And I'm coming to you today, as I'm sure you were somewhat intrigued by the title of our email which went out that stated that a Mississippi judge has tossed the list pending attempt by Henderson Auctions to block the sale of a property located in I've always had a little trouble with that, Kosciuszko, Mississippi. Hopefully I'm a little closer this time. And so we wanted to take this opportunity to bring you up to speed on those developments. Some of you may recall that we put out a feature in September of 2014. It's hard to believe it has been that long, but it has. And that entailed litigation which Henderson Auctions had initiated in Livingston Parish, in which we'll briefly recap for you what was alleged in that lawsuit. The lawsuit entailed Jeff Henderson and Janet Cagley. That would be Marvin Henderson's son and daughter. They are the principals of JAH Enterprises, which is a DBA for Henderson Auctions, and they alleged that they were in partnership with a gentleman named Blake Everett, who resides in Mississippi now, with regard to the purchase of a Crown Casino vessel, which was attempted to be auctioned off, and the auction was unsuccessful. Now, according to Mr. Henderson, there was $600,000 paid for the casino, $300,000 improvement, gave them $900,000 in total costs associated with the casino. As I said, there was an attempt to auction it that did not work out so well, and so they went into negotiated sale mode. And they reached a sales agreement for $350,000 in cash, plus the title to a property in Kosciuszko, Mississippi, named the Ivy House. The $350,000, interestingly enough, it doesn't say so in Mr. Henderson's lawsuit. However, the buyer turned out to be Blake Everett, the very gentleman whom Mr. Henderson is suing. And we're going to provide you a link for the transfer document, transferring title of the vessel from JAH Enterprises to Mr. Everett's company. That is provided by the Department of Homeland Security and is recorded as a sale for the vessel for $350,000 in cash. And bear in mind, there was also to be title to this Ivy House in Kosciuszko, Mississippi. Now, what apparently transpired after is Blake found a true third-party buyer for the same amount, the $350,000, but for some reason there was a need to go through Blake to facilitate the transaction. And again, we're providing you the link for the transfer of the Crown Casino vessel from JAH Enterprises to Mr. Everett's company. Interesting enough, that document is executed by Marvin Henderson himself. Typically, Jeff and Janet run things, but in this particular instance, Mr. Henderson is the one who signed the document conveying title to the vessel to Mr. Everett's company. All right, so we have the situation now where we've got this $350,000 in cash. You can do the math. If you take Henderson Auctions filing, that they had $900,000 in it, $350,000 cash, they still would need, excuse me, $550,000. Now, last time, the point we were at back in September of 2014, Mr. Henderson filed litigation upon Henderson Auctions finding out that there was to be an attempt to auction off this Ivy House in Mississippi, and they sought a temporary restraining order to block the sale. And Mr. Henderson filed, or Henderson Auctions filed a lawsuit. You have to forgive me, sometimes I'm in the habit of saying Mr. Henderson, and it would be Mr. Henderson, be Jeff Henderson. He is the proprietor of JAH Enterprise. He's also a member of the Auctioneers Licensing Board. And so they got wind of this and they filed a temporary restraining order to block Mr. Everett from making the sale, and they filed a lawsuit in Livingston Parish. We'll give you the link where you can go back and see not only the video but the original lawsuit. We'll give you a link for that original lawsuit if you care to go back over it. I'm not going to rehash the whole thing, but basically what they alleged in that lawsuit is that there was some fraud, some misrepresentation, things of that nature. All right, that will bring us, now that lawsuit that was filed in Livingston Parish was never served. In fact, to this day, it has not been served. However, a key question to ask is that, okay, this is what's going on in Louisiana. They said that they had problems trying to get Mr. Everett served, so they hired a private process server. But the file doesn't have any further documentation beyond that point of attempting to hire a private process server. So there was really nothing to report about what's going on in Louisiana. However, it would beg the question, well, gee, I wonder what all might be going on in Mississippi, since that is where the property is located. And there's been quite a bit going on in Mississippi, so let's cover that right now. Henderson Auctions filed a lis pendens to block any potential sale of the property. Now, for those not familiar with real estate, or as we call it in Louisiana, immovable property, what a lis pendens basically says is that, hey, we either have litigation or we anticipate litigation in which we believe there's an interest that we should have had in this property, and we are asserting our rights to claim. And it will basically block a sale for the time that it is out there. So they filed this lis pendens. They originally filed the lis pendens on March the 26th of 14. If you go back and look at that conveyance on the vessel, it was back in early December 2013. The lis pendens was originally filed on March the 26th of 2014. However, I think they had some signature problems. You know, typically in order for things to be valid, you got to have valid signatures on there. So they had to file an amended lis pendens, and that was filed on June the 4th of 2014. And we're going to give you a link for that amended lis pendens, in which they basically state that, hey, we believe we would have rights to ownership interest in this property. And so from the filing of that lis pendens, which, as I said, is an effort, you know, it's a mechanism to block the sale of immovable Louisiana folk real estate for Mississippi folk, and this property is in Mississippi, so we call it real estate. Most people can associate with real estate, whereas in Louisiana, we get a little bit different phraseology, and we call it immovable property. But at any rate, this was filed on June the 4th, 2014. We're going to give you a link for that lis pendens. Now, what was Mr. Everett's reaction to all of these efforts to block his sale? Well, I think you can put yourself in Mr. Everett's position, and I'm referring to Blake. There's actually the son and the father, but it appears that Blake, the son, is pretty much calling the shots, at least from everything that can be gathered. In fact, it's debatable whether Sam has much involvement at all, Blake's father. But at any rate, you can anticipate that Mr. Everett was none too pleased to have his ability to sell this property blocked, and so he filed suit in the state of Mississippi, and he basically said that nobody from Henderson Auctions is going to be able to demonstrate that they have any legitimate interest in this property, the Ivy House, that's the property in Mississippi. Nobody from Henderson Auction is going to be able to assert that they have any valid interest in this property, all right? And I'm just going to say this, you know, we talk about continuing education. It'll be on the next LALB agenda. This is one of the things that Reverend Phillips and I believe we provide. We're providing some of the highest quality continuing education by bringing you real-life examples and not just something you would read in some textbook, and this is a perfect example. And the moral of this particular episode is going to be that whenever you're dealing with real estate or in Louisiana immovable property, you better have something in writing, because whatever oral agreement you may say that existed is not going to be enforceable, okay? And so Mr. Everett was asserting that they're not going to be able to produce any evidence of them having a valid interest in the title of this property. Now, the whole matter dragged on until July the 7th of 2015. On July the 7th of 2015, the Mississippi judge issued an order, and we're going to provide you a link for that order, that expunged the lis pendens, okay, making it of no effect, thereby freeing Mr. Everett to sell the property, basically. And if you go in and you look at that document, you will see there is an acknowledgement of the Louisiana lawsuit. But basically, the judge or this order that got signed is saying that, hey, there's been 18 months to provide documentation evidencing ownership or an interest in this immovable property, and there's been nothing that's been able to be provided. There's no evidence whatsoever that anyone at Henderson Auctions, be it Janet Cagley, Jeff Henderson, JAH Enterprises, J3 Investments, there's been no evidence, no written document that could be produced to demonstrate that they would have a valid interest in this property to block the sale. And remember, that was what was being asserted in the lis pendens way back when it got filed by Henderson Auctions or JAH Enterprises. And so with that being the case, the judge tossed it. The judge signed an order expunging the lis pendens. Now, that brings us through to the current day and developments of this week. As might be obvious, I think it would go without saying that Mr. Henderson is on record as favoring litigation to be in Livingston Parish, his home parish. And, one of the beautiful things about these videos is that we can take a little stroll back down memory lane. And so to demonstrate this, I'm going to break away for about 20 seconds or so. You may recall some time back that the Henderson Auctions was being sued by the Louisiana Department of Revenue. And back in November of 2011, Mr. Henderson made a very infamous statement that's saying, the Department of Revenue doesn't want to take me on in Livingston Parish. I wish they'd come on. But I don't want you to hear it from me. I want you to hear it from the horse's mouth itself. So let's break away for about 20 seconds and let you watch that little brief video clip from November of 2011.
That's correct.
In 07, and evidently they don't want to face court with us in Livingston Parish. I wish they'd come on. But they don't want to face court with us in Livingston Parish because...
All right, so now you've seen Mr. Henderson boldly telling the Louisiana Department of Revenue to come on, let's bring it on in Livingston Parish. And so this week, what has been done is that Henderson Auctions has filed a motion. We're going to give you the link for the full filing of that motion that says, hey, look, Mr. Everett has not been able to be served with the original petition that we filed in Livingston Parish, and therefore we are filing an ex parte motion for us to have an attorney appointed to represent Blake Everett in this civil litigation in Livingston Parish. So that will bring you up to speed on the present litigation that is entailing that Crown Casino. It's been a year and a half since we last talked to you about it, but that's because there's been quite a bit going on and we needed to get to see how things unfolded in all of this. And obviously there's still some left to be unfolded here as to exactly how the judge is going to handle this latest filing seeking to have an attorney to represent Mr. Everett in Livingston Parish. And certainly as we see how that progresses, we will bring you up to speed. But the purpose of all of this is to convey the importance. If you are dealing with real estate, and I'm sure Ms. Jacobs, if you're watching this, if you're at the LALB meeting, you will reinforce this, I am certain. When you are dealing with real estate or in Louisiana immovable property, you darn well better have something in writing that would establish your prospective ownership interest. So that's going to be the moral of this particular continuing education. Reverend Phillips has been delighted that we are, no matter what we believe that whether continuing education is reinstated in Louisiana or not, we believe by bringing you episodes such as this, you are getting the best quality continuing education you could possibly get. You've been educated a little bit, for those of you who don't hold real estate license, what a lis pendens is. You've been advised of the importance of getting anything that would establish ownership of real estate in writing. It's imperative. That's going to wrap up this particular episode. It brings you up to speed on that particular litigation. I will briefly say that in coming days we are going to do a video that hits the high points. Now this one was primarily geared toward auctioneers, to try to benefit auctioneers, particularly if you're dealing with real estate. The next video we will do will be contrasting the Betty Story litigation, which entailed Louisiana auctioneer Marlo Schmidt, with that of Judy Fasola, which entails auctioneer Ken Bueller. And we'll compare and contrast the two, and I think you'll find that most interesting as well, and it will very, very much be interesting for any consumers, because remember, that is my role within LAPA, is to broaden the knowledge of consumers when you're dealing with auctioneers. And I'm looking very forward to presenting to you those contrasting litigations and why one is probably quite successful, the other may struggle a little bit, and we will go into great detail as to why that would be the case. Because it will certainly be beneficial to consumers to bear some of these facts in mind. So that will wrap it up for today's edition of Continuing Education. We hope you've enjoyed this update on the Henderson Auctions litigation involving the Crown Casino. And remember, if you're dealing with real estate, you need something in writing to substantiate any ownership interest that you would assert to a court that you have. Thank you so much. This is Robert Burns. We hope everyone's new year has gotten off to a great start, and we will look to see you again real soon. Thank you so much.